1979 could be called the quiet before the storm, but only because the year that followed was so big. Everything was in place, and yet the games just weren't up to scratch. It was still a male-dominated area, though things were about to change thanks to Namco. Yes, Galaxian was their answer to Space Invaders, sporting faster, more complex gameplay with better, more colourful graphics. Enemies had their own personalities, and the game appealed far more to women. Namco would build on this game's success with several sequels in later years, as well as a game known as Pac-Man, which was actually already released in Japan at this point, but didn't reach American arcades until the following year. Galaxian is still where it really started, and you can still find references to it in later games, including Ridge Racer. Atari was still the big name, and after the success of Christmas 1978 marketing, they decided to start doing it all year round. This helped bring the game Adventure into the limelight. A top-down adventure game with duck dragons and keys. It was crude by today's or even 1980s RPG standards, but was essential to furthering game development thanks to an unexpected Easter egg. It was well hidden, and yet was still discovered by gaming addicts at the time. Developers of games were often ignored, but when Warren Robinett slipped his into the game, it caused a huge amount of controversy and resulted in several game developers forming their own group, known as Activision. Vectors were increasingly common in arcade games, allowing for crisp lines that had several advantages over sprites. In fact, one game that used them was Atari's most successful game this year, named Asteroids. It added depth to the gameplay by having asteroids split into smaller ones when shot. The arcade version also had a controversial hyperspace button, which would randomly teleport the ship to another area of the screen, often resulting in sudden death. Lunar Lander was also released by Atari with vector graphics this year. Yes, it had already previously been released on mainframe computers, but this was the first time it was easily available for all to play. Tailgunner also jumped on the vector trend and had the first official Star Wars license. The same developer, Tim Skelly, also created Warrior, a top-down sword fighting game. The world's first handheld console was also released this year, known as the Microvision. It was large and clunky and had all sorts of issues ranging from electric circuits, to the screen dying, and to problems with the batteries. It had interchangeable cartridges, which would become far more common later on. The only notable game that was released for the system was the first ever Star Trek game. Mattel, the largest toy company in 1979, wanted to get into gaming, so released Intellivision. Unlike Atari's futuristic or space-age focus, Mattel had a lot of sports licenses. I guess you could call them the EA of the time. The console had a telephone-style controller with 16 buttons and a 16-direction circular D-pad style thing. Wow, there were few titles available for it in 1979, but various decent and reasonably complex games came out for the system in later years, including Tron, He-Man, and a nice colourful first-person Dungeons & Dragons game. It also had Star Strike, a Star Wars rip-off. 2 million units of the console were sold. Interestingly, despite being rivals, Atari and Mattel ported their games across to each other's systems, which I suppose makes sense and helped build on either company's success. Last year I said that Superman was released in 1978. Sources seem to conflict over when it was released. It appears that for the majority of the world they got it in 1979, but it was still released in 1978. The Apple II computer got a dungeon crawler game by the name of Akalabeth, which was made by a single teenager using BASIC. This was the year that a lot of RPGs came out, some top-down, others first-person. This one was both. If anybody is interested in chess, mainframe computers at the time were capable of an ELO rating of just over 2000, but video chess was the first released for the Atari 2600. It was a supposedly impossible feat as the console was only capable of 6 sprites in a row at a time. There were 8 skill settings ranging from 10 seconds to 10 hours, though the second hardest was just 12 minutes. At these hardest 2 levels, it would display all of the moves on screen as it was thinking about them, but would occasionally forget to place a piece back, having more than one move per time. Crafty. And that concludes 1979 for video games. 1980 is a large year where a lot really takes off as gaming comes out of the basement and into every nook and cranny known to man.